Okay, so welcome everyone, really from my heart. It is very wonderful to get the returnees, plus we also have some new students, very welcome. What is the objective of this semester? The objective primarily is to look at how we can change society. First, we try to understand how the society took place, what are the mechanisms that take us from individuals to society, and then see why and how society evolves. That has to be understood very clearly. And then we have to get into the subject of why the change that we anticipate in societies to be good. This is the lesson we learned in the past semester, that the quantum worldview is a very optimistic one. And it says that changes should come to the good. But that is not what is happening right now. So we have to understand it clearly why it is not happening, and then clearly define where our responsibility lies. So this is the part where you pay deep attention. I am very grateful that you are here. But I want you to understand that being here comes with a huge amount of responsibility. And I mean the word in its meaning. The meaning is the ability to respond appropriately to any stimulus that is present. And that ability is something that is not easy to generate. Responsibility is something that is not innate. We have to learn it. And so always pay attention, okay, I'm getting this lesson, I'm really learning it, I'm understanding it, and then ask the question, okay, now can I take the responsibility that comes with my understanding? All these words have to be taken seriously. Understand. Understand is a word that is loaded. Many meanings that people give many meanings. Sometimes people think, oh, I just know it. That's understanding. Knowing is just cognizing it, and cognizing can happen at many levels. So understanding also, if you identify it with cognizing, can happen at many levels. And then, what really means, this is where we have to comprehend that there is a meaning into it, and that meaning goes deeply into who we are. Understanding change ourselves. Understanding the change it brings in us, that's when we can take responsibility. Because we can only be responsible for us. Let's see that clearly. That otherwise, responsibility has no sense. How can I take responsibility for society if I cannot take responsibility for myself? So everything that changes me are the things that I become very aware. So this is the very first thing that you attend to. Understanding and responsibility. The other thing about consciousness investigation that we are all doing, and before we even begin to talk about social change, we have to recognize that you can only understand consciousness to the extent that you experience consciousness. Does that sound a little obscure? Obscurity is good. Initially it should sound a little mysterious. Consciousness is different. Consciousness is at once a word. Consciousness is also a being. We are conscious. And therefore, the state of consciousness that we experience is a limitation on our understanding of consciousness always. If your consciousness is constricted, however people talk about expanded states of consciousness, it don't make any sense to you. This is a problem, huge problem. No other field will have this limitation. Every other field, except consciousness-related fields, which is basically all the fields connected to the human being. The other things that we call fields of study, physics, chemistry, or society looked upon independent of the human beings, they all seem to be independent of my state of consciousness. But as soon as we have touched the human beings, conscious beings, things change rapidly, drastically. Because everything is dependent on the state of consciousness from which I am looking. So if your state of consciousness is constricted, your understanding of consciousness will be extremely limited. Recognize it, please. And therefore pay attention to the practices. Those practices and the theory that you're going to learn, they are completely complementary. One without the other is impossible. If you get into the practices without understanding of what is going on, that is not very useful either, because you will interpret the effect of the practices with the very limited constricted consciousness that you have, and very limited understanding that you have, and it will be completely inadequate. You will miss a huge opportunity. On the other hand, if you don't do the practices, you will always look at the words, look at the meanings with constricted consciousness, and that will also miss the point. So your first responsibility is to recognize that theory and practice go together. Do not expect to understand consciousness without doing the practices. It will be only in vain. This is what people try to do, all the materialist scientists, most of the neuroscientists, most of the biologists that we have. Why do they object so much to quantum theory of consciousness, or mystical theories of consciousness, or philosophical ideas about consciousness? Why? Because they are always looking at from their consciousness. And that consciousness is so limited. Those of you who are present in the last semester, you took a course on neuroscience, and you saw how the brain determines much of what we can comprehend. And if you don't open up the brain to its complete capacity, then your understanding is going to be limited by your brain. And it's not going to be very much, because the brain has processes in it that completely drains out even the basic aspect of consciousness that you experience. The fact that experience has two poles, subject and object. But people have difficulty to their understanding subject, because most people don't even experience that you have an eye. Okay? So this is why the preamble is necessary. Now, I completely recognize that some of you are coming fresh. If you have any difficulty in following anything that I said, please raise your hand. I'll immediately answer you without any hesitation. Others, the best procedure we'll accept is clarity. Anytime you can raise your hand, interrupt, and that's fine. But keep your heavy questions for the afternoon session. We'll have an afternoon session which is completely devoted to Q&A. and there will field all of your general questions. General questions of pursuit your philosophy, your personal questions, questions of deep wisdom that of course you are completely capable of intuiting. Okay? So our very first topic to review about the quantum worldview, the fundamental questions are twofold. One fundamental question is the sciences. What is the difference between Newtonian science, which most people still follow, and quantum science? We have to understand it very clearly. The difference is basic. How we look at objects, how we look at the movement of objects, how we look at the change in the movement of objects. All three are different in the quantum approach and the Newtonian approach. Second question is equally important. You have many mystical, philosophical belief systems that you are familiar. Why are you especially familiar? Because you are here not particularly because you have questions from the scientific point of view. Very few of our grounded in science, and this is to be expected. As I said, scientists have very constricted consciousness. They do not want to entertain a view which is so different from what they are capable of experiencing. So you're coming from a background where you have been introduced to many philosophies, many ways of looking at consciousness, including the spiritual one. And here is a scope for you to pick up prejudices, which is even deeper than the scientific prejudice. I'm sorry to say that really it hurts both ways. On one hand, your mind is very open and you want to investigate reality. On the other hand, your mind has become equally narrow because you have beliefs that you have picked up from the religious spiritual side without examining them, because they sound good, because they sound appropriate to what you are experiencing. So obviously there are better philosophies, better introductions to consciousness, but better does not mean correct. Better means still could be imperfect. Better, but not quite right. And if we take not quite right worldviews to try to make our changes, again we will miss the boat. So, as Krishnamurti, a very wonderful mystic, used to ask his audience always, just see that the traditions existed for thousands of years. Have people changed? Have people changed? That's the thing. Notice this, that those methods that they gave may be working for a few people, but did not work for most people. Then we have to ask the question, why doesn't it work for most people? We can always dismiss the failure by saying, oh, people just are ignorant. This is the point of view that is very easy to take. People are ignorant. But blaming the people for it, blaming for the students, for teachers' inadequacies is at best only a partially correct description of the situation. Never is anything completely wrong or completely right. That's the nature of language, nature of mind. We cannot seem to describe mentally what is. Therefore, we always have to admit that there is hope for mistakes. And when we open up our mind this way to spiritual mystical traditions, then only we will be able to comprehend advancements of thinking, advancements of working. Notice that we have to reconcile two completely different ways of looking at things. Science brings objectivity. Science brings very definite ways of getting answers. Science brings ways to get answers that can be verified in the laboratory. How can we deny the validity of science? On the other hand, science also misses. Why does science miss? Very simple. Certain things may not be so easily experimentally discernible unless you have good theories. Could Newton do experiments on quantum aspects of matter? No. Because the theory wasn't there. How to look depends on what theories we have to look. And how do we discover those theories? That itself, of course, is a mystery. So we should be very open, and we are very open. When we are very open, we realize, of course, people can theorize much, much better without even having the advantage of experimental data. Because one piece of apparatus for consciousness research we forget. It's us. Consciousness happens to us, and that is also data. If we look at that, then it is easy to respect the mystics, the philosophers, because they too discovered their theories through their experience. And those experiences are data. We can be skeptical about the construction of the experience, because that depends on the culture, that depends on the language, that depends on anything. But we cannot doubt that they had some experience that they are trying to describe. In this way, we develop a respect for both. And then when an opportunity arises that we are able to comprehend some things that people have theorized based on their experience and degree, very limited cultural, social, language abilities to express those intuitions. Still, if we find that we can validate this with today's scientific ideas, then we should be very joyful. That doesn't mean that we give up our discerning mind. We still have to comprehend, we still have to use it to see if it is valuable, if it is useful to us, in the present day, in the present time. I'm not asking for any blind faith in anything, we don't need that. That becomes a detriment. But we do need a softening, a suspension of disbelief. To the extent that you observe what is being said. At the same time, open up your skeptical mind after you have absorbed what is being said. And repeat this process again and again. Open up, suspend your disbelief, and then let the disbeliefs come. This is the process of understanding. And during this process, what happens is something magical. We'll talk about that magic later, but that magic is based. That's a very broad name we give to that magic. We call it intuition, or we call it creativity, creative insight. But these magics are the basis of consciousness research. Without these magics happening, we could not do consciousness research. So if you are close to this magic, consciousness will escape you, as it does most neuroscientists. questions at this point? Good. So then, let's get into our subject. This morning I wanted to completely comprehend what is Newton trying to tell us. Now, let's be very respectful to Newton. How do we become respectful to Newton? We imagine ourselves being in the 17th century. This fellow is born in 1643. And what is the background in which he is born? Nothing is known. There is another Italian guy, Galileo, who has done some very intriguing experiments, some regularities. And the second guy, a German guy named Johannes Kepler, he has done also some very intriguing results about the orbits of planets. On top of it, there is a scientific system in place that is part of the belief system of the current worldview, which is governed by Christianity, by a fellow who is called Pope in Rome. And that fellow interprets everything there is about reality. In this environment, a kid is born in a little town of Lincolnshire in England. And this kid is very brilliant. He used to do very strange things according to his neighbors. But his brilliance was recognized, and universities already existed in very different form than we have. And he got a position. We have full professor very quickly because he was just so brilliant. And at the age of something like 20, 21, he figured out how to formulate science. Please feel the enormity of it. You have to feel it to get to Newton's work. We sometimes very quickly forget how revolutionary this kind of thinking is when there is nothing known. Nobody knew anything about how to formulate questions except what Aristotle said, something like 300, 400 BC. Brilliant guy, Greek philosopher, very high standing, extremely intelligent, no doubt. He wrote some things about the world, and that became the dogma of the Christian world. And Newton saw right away that this dogma does not fit the experiments that he himself repeated, Galileo's experiments, and the data that Kepler collected with his modern instruments called telescopes. So he knew that Aristotle's theories are wrong, just as Galileo knew, just as Kepler knew, but of course the world was not anywhere close to accepting it. Because there was no additional proof except those experimental data. There was no theory. So his job is to provide a theory for those things. That's his motive. That's his inspiration. How do I theorize? And he realized that to make the basis of a theory, I have to first know what I'm talking about. So he starts talking about, and he does three things. Let's see. I just write on this and it works, or I should write over there for now. Okay, good. We have that. Objects are material objects, and they are particles. Material objects, that will be called particles. What is the example of a particle? Think of them as billiard balls. This is our model of what we mean by particles. And then he says that we have to state what is the normal state of these objects. What is the state of homeostasis? If we want to discover how objects move and what they are going to become, we have to first assume what their being is, what they start with, what is their natural state. So, nature of objects is first step to define the natural state, and the second state is what do they return to? What is their natural way of being? What we call homeostasis. So what is the state of homeostasis? And he found that although it may seem like state of rest is the answer, but his great insight to us that no, it's state of uniform motion, motion at constant velocity. There's a bit of technicality here. Don't get bogged down into technicalities because this is not a physics lesson that I'm giving you. I'm just giving you a feel for what Newton did and how important it is to think like this. Uniform motion just brings in one difficult to intuit aspect, that different movement can be part of that homeostasis. And this is where we realize that movement is relative. This is why. Movement is relative. Now this takes a while to understand if you already don't know it, but all of you know it, right? Movement is relative means that, for example, you are moving in a car, but if somebody else is moving in a car also and goes parallel to you, then you can shake hands with that person. Have you noticed? Have you ever tried to do that? It's fun. But really, there is absolutely no difference between state of rest and state of uniform movement. You are going at a constant pace. If somebody else goes at a constant speed in the same direction, which is a constant velocity, speed and direction both are the same, then you are in the same state of uniform motion. Your reference point is exactly the same. So Newton realized that. So we have a clear definition of what the homeostatic state is. And then the next is the very important question, and this was sort of known. This was not completely original with him, that agent of change will have to be something that we call force. What was original is that he figured it out, how that force works. I won't bother you about the equations, but he figured out the agent of change, how the changes take place with the application of a force. He gave us a mathematical equation, and he discovered all the mathematics himself. This is his great. He discovered the mathematics necessary to deal with the equation that he gave. So we find another truth.
Okay.
This is also fundamental with Newton, mathematics. Mathematics. Now let's look at the situation from that respect. Now we have that right. Imagine 1760s. Now we have 350 years later. 2019. From this perspective, what is correct and what is not correct? When we face the human being, when we make models of consciousness, where do we have to be skeptical and where can we say that our basic idea is correct? Okay. Initially, we are very skeptical about everything, right? Well, immediately we come down the road and we see that no, matter is valid. Human being has material body, right? Would anybody like to deny that we have material body? What's the purpose of denying? It's obvious. So the idea that material object that part applies is not a bad idea. Where do we question it? We look at our experience. Is it all the experience we have, our body moving in space? No. Immediately realize we have a huge difference from these bodies that Newton was talking about and completely succeeded in describing their movement by doing that. This is the other thing. He completely succeeded. Description of his theory for the movement of planets and movement of objects in space and terrestrial situations works. But they're all that are moving in space and time. What we have that is not susceptible to such a description? We immediately describe, we have internal experiences, thoughts, feelings. Can we give the same kind of description to thoughts and feelings? Uniform motion? Agent of change is force. If I apply force on you, does your thought necessarily change? It does sometimes, but it doesn't also. So obviously, Newton's assumptions are failing. That's the first thing you have to recognize. The objects are different. The objects are not material objects necessarily. State of homeostasis. Again, we are in the same kind of dilemma. State of homeostasis. Can we define uniform movement of thought, uniform movement of feeling? Do it and you will fail completely. We can't, can we? So, how to define even the homeostatic condition of our thoughts and feelings, the objects of our experience, is not so easy. Right? We have to bring in new aspects of thinking. The objects are different, their way they express themselves is different. Agent of change. Now here, of course, we recognize that yes, I have a thought, and then you give a thought, and the two thoughts interact, and indeed my thought can change. Happens many times. Everybody would agree that yes, if you have a thought and I have a thought, force is just a name. Force does not have to have the connotation of being violent. Force is just an interaction. So interaction of my thought with your thought indeed can change my thought. That's not a problem. So we can say yes, to a certain extent there is a dynamics of thought that responds to agents of change that we talk about in connection with material movement and Newton's laws. Okay. This is the way of analyzing old theories. Now, if we did that, then immediately certain things follow. One thing that followed is mathematics work. And many scientists to this day became very prejudiced that mathematics must work. A scientific theory got to be mathematical theory. Now this is very convenient thinking, but look at how exclusive this thinking becomes. Anything non-mathematical is to be suspect. Main baggage, major baggage, like a straitjacket. Once you have worn this straitjacket, it's very difficult to do any theory of consciousness. Because consciousness is something that we experience immediately. We notice very strange thing about consciousness. Not only the objects are different, first of all, objects are clearly not just material objects, there are mental objects, objects of feeling, or those objects. And then this huge problem, no, the experience that we have, we call it awareness, but what is it? It has two poles. One is loosely referred to as I, and the other would be referred to as object. The point is that as soon as I have said that there is a thought, we also have to agree that there is an experiencer of the thought. But we went through some details in the past semester where you saw that it is not as simple as it seems at the beginning, that subject and object or poles are clearly visible. They are not. A little experimentation will show that I can also look at the subject and make the subject into a me, into an object. Do that, close your eyes for a moment and have a thought and see that you're experiencing the thought. Okay? Do it seriously, please. You have a thought moving in your awareness and you are experiencing the thought. And then see that you can also look at the experiencer. Easy. You can look at yourself experiencing the thought. That's the unfortunate subtlety that enters our discussion. So subject and the objectified. This idea of objectified subject has to be introduced, and it clouds everything. So I can be made into a me. Objectified subject we call me. Subject we call God. So fundamental question of consciousness is the question that you already faced and worked with for many hours, and in between too. I'm especially speaking for the newcomers. Just be patient about this a little bit, because you didn't have that lesson. So do this meditation very carefully for a few days in this starting this very moment, which is that look at that objectification, how that takes place. You look at yourself, looking at object. Okay, you have objectified yourself completely. Now ask the next question. Can I look at myself, looking at myself, looking at the object? One step down, you're standing there and looking at the witness to yourself, looking at the object. Of course you can do that. Valentina is going to lead you through this kind of meditation every day so that you've got a complete idea of what this is what. Now this is the magic. Then a magic takes place. And you have to completely allow this magic to happen. Allow with your mind, you intend that let this magic happen. Intend that I'll relax. I'll relax into it. I don't get tense about it. If we do that, then a strange thing happens. We really fall into a state where we feel happy, relaxed. That's our key. That's the expansion of consciousness that we are talking about. From that expanded consciousness, immediately it becomes very clear, this process must have led to the expansion. Ask yourself, where did the expansion come from? I did not start from an expanded state. I started from a very tense state. I'm trying to understand something. And then all of a sudden I feel relaxed and happy. Expansion. So expansion must have come because my state of experience has changed. The experiencer was a tense one, and that has changed into something that is more real to me. More real to me why? Because this one can change the other one. The other one is a temporal thing. It can change to this one. But this one is something that perhaps is the end point of how much regression we can do towards this looking at. So the objectification has a limit. Objectification ends at some place. Me ends at some place. Me does not go on indefinitely. There is a place where there is no me. Big discovery. Could that be the source of the expansion? Could that be the source of happiness? This becomes the genuine question of consciousness. Okay. Is the process clear? Please raise your hand if...
Can you please explain again?
Okay. So, first thing we are doing is to look at the subject that is looking at the objects that are arising in consciousness. Very good analogy is clouds passing on the sky. And when you look at the clouds on the sky, except here we are closing our eyes, so there is no external clouds and external sky, just mind sky, and clouds are the thoughts. Thoughts passing by and I'm looking. This is the first process we start with. I'm looking at the tense because I'm also trying to understand the process. And then we start the next part. We said, why not look at the looker? Look at the looker itself. So I stand in the background and I now look at myself looking at the thought. This is called witnessing. I become a witness to the process. Process is, a looker is looking at the thought. The looker himself now will become an object. That's the objectified subject, that is not me. So I am looking at me looking at the object. I is now in the background. And of course, the next question we can ask person. I can also look at me looking at the object. So I can regress and regress and regress. Of course, it gets very, very difficult to do that. Very, very difficult to regress indefinitely. We can talk about it, conceptualize it, but actually doing it is something else. But you don't need to. Actually, this witnessing does the trick. We just remember that we could have done it in principle. And then we just continue this witnessing process. And then the magic happens. We relax. And that's when we ask the question of what produced the relaxation. And what is relaxation? What is this thing that we did? This happens in everywhere. Valentina promised me that she'll do a watch in the heart. It will be good. Same thing happened, no? We are looking at the energies in the heart, which is a feeling, wonderful feeling. And then we look at me looking at the heart. And very soon I become expanded. And because I'm looking at heart, I start with some expanded energy. This expansion is just simply wonderful. I become loving. Amazing experience, right? But the magic is the same. This magic of falling into something that is bigger than us, bigger than the homeostatic state that we experience, that we call our ego. This self, this inner self, We call it quantum self. Transpersonal psychologists call it transpersonal self. Spiritual traditions call it by various names, even spirit. Christianity calls it Holy Spirit. In Sanskrit, the word is Antar Atman. Antar means inner, Atman means self, so inner self. Antar Atman. Hebrew language is Ein Sof. Oneness, self that gives us the impression of oneness because of that expansion. In that expansion, if we can stay, it seems like I can love you. When you feel relaxed, indeed, loving becomes so easy. All the points of discrepancy that occurs that makes us unhappy about others seem to fall away from that expansion. So you are getting also a glimpse at oneness. All these things together. Okay. Many things to notice here. Many things to notice here. Homeostatic state, good, ego. But agent of change, what can you say about the change? The kind of change that took place itself. And if you were Newton, you would say, okay, I'm analyzing the effect of a force and I am writing mathematics. Mathematics works, what does that mean? Mathematics works because the change that the force brings about in movement is what we call continuous change. The change happens a little bit at a time. This is why we can do mathematics better. Mathematics works when the change is continuous. We call it the assumption of continuity. So look at what is happening. So Newton is assuming mathematics, and mathematics come with the idea of continuity. And easy to see, look, this is not a physics lesson, but you just visualize the force acts, and indeed, I can discern the effect of the force in a gradual way. It's not an abrupt thing. Indeed, the effect will be gradual. And this is why we can do math with that continuity. What is happening here? We must call it discontinuity that just gone away. We fell into a state. But there was no continuous process that we could identify. Discontinuity. So immediately we notice that the worldview that mathematics gives us is a faulty worldview because mathematics cannot handle discontinuity, it can only handle continuity. Yeah, good.
Amitji, you said that this is discontinuity, but over here also there is an aspect of continuity that we are observing ourselves as the observer, we are witnessing, and then we move ahead, and then we are again witnessing the witness.
Yes.
So there is a continuous process here also.
Ask yourself, okay, how far did we go? 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 And then let's construct a similar process. Very good question. The similar process we can do with numbers. Okay? We can design magic. With numbers, 1, 2, 3. You can think of 4, 5. Yes? How far do you want to go this way? Limited, very limited. 1,000, 10,000, very limited. So let's change the game. Let's make it generation of big numbers. We know how to do it. 10 to the power. We do 10 to the power 1, 10. 10 to the power 2, 100. 10 to the power 10. Immediately very huge, right? Now it's huge, 10 billion. 10 to the power 100, huge, huge number. Nobody has words for it. Huge number. 10 to the power billion. Okay? And then we discover, yes, I don't even have to be doing that. I can do 10 to the power billion to the power billion. Or I can do billion to the power billion to the power billion. Or I can do trillion to the power trillion to the trillion. What am I getting at? I'm getting at the concept of infinity. Think?
So actually, if you try this exercise, what you have, very interesting exercise, if you are getting some more thoughts from it. When you start increasing these numbers of the observers, all in sequence observing the next guy, at some point it becomes indistinct. They all start merging into one.
But the point I'm trying to make is very simple one, right? However we think, however big number, and however we figure out algorithm to generate big number, we are as far from infinity as I was in the beginning.
That's true.
This is why George Gamow had a joke. The joke is that Hungarians cannot think mathematics. So we wrote a book called 1, 2, 3 Infinity. Because after 1, 2, 3 they don't go 4, it's an infinity. And it is really very valid. People who think that I don't think of billion to the power billion get closer to infinity, they are fooling themselves. 1 to 3 infinity is as valid as billion to the power billion to the power billion infinity. Because you can never really approach close to infinity, whatever infinity is, right? But yet we fall into it. We fall into it how? By simply relaxing to the idea that yes, it makes sense to say that there is infinity.
So, Amitji, are you saying that then we fall into infinity? We have an experience of
So
expansion?
we recognize that at some point we just give up this process and relax. And then somehow we fall into the expansion. So we can decide to fall into the expansion after the initial state of just witnessing, or we can go this silly game and play, but even then we'll never approach that no me, except we can always fall into it.
That's the discontinuity.
That's the magic. That falling into it enables us to comprehend things that we could not comprehend by continuity. So human consciousness must have in its theater not only continuity but also discontinuity.
So, but are you saying that maths cannot handle discontinuity? Are you saying? Are you saying that maths cannot handle discontinuity?
The mathematics cannot handle infinity in the equations that we are talking about. There is a mathematics of infinity to some sense in set theory, but it does not apply to equations of the kind that physics uses. In physics, continuity is the basis of mathematics.
I think the question which you asked is that if I am an observer looking at myself and then going back regressing, so is it not a continuous process? I guess that was the question, right?
But I got the answer.
Okay. It is a continuous process. But however much we do the continuous process, we can never reach this state of expansion.
Yes, expansion will happen in discontinuity.
And then you get exhausted of watching yourself and
You watch yourself, regress, it will go on, but you will remain tense. And that tension never goes away because you're always wondering where is this no me. And then you just relax, or what we call give up. When you give up,
that is force, that is force.
you all of a sudden you yourself find that you have expanded. And then you ask the question, where did this expansion come from? I was contracted, I was tense, and now I'm feeling expanded.
In this case, who is I?
That's the point. So we are saying then that in some way we must have reached, must have touched that no me. Otherwise, where did this expansion come from? Here I was tense, looking for the no me. And then all of a sudden I'm feeling expanded. So some change abruptly came over me. That is a discontinuous change is what I'm getting at. And discontinuously, I might have, I mean, this is still an assumption, but I must have fallen into something that gave me the sense of expansion. And that's all we need to assume right now, that there is an expanded state, which we might call I, where there is no objectification. That's the state we call no me, no self.
What is this called in Sanskrit, or this Rishis used to do, this is Sakshi Vav, what you are telling. After end of Sakshi Vav, what happens?
So the point is that there is no need to continue the Sakshi Baba regression. It's useless. It's like 1 to 3 infinity versus trying to think big numbers and we think, oh, we can handle so many big numbers. Big deal. You're still as far from infinity as you are when you say 1 to 3, right? And so we notice that Sakshi Baba is enough. If we can just witness ourselves watching the thought, that's enough. We stay in there, and sooner or later, as soon as we begin to relax, we will relax.
What will happen after the end of Sakshi Vav?
So end must be that we fall into the no me.
Yeah, but practically, who has done these things? What has happened to them?
That's what has happened, relaxation. This is why the meditation is called relaxation meditation. But the important question for you to ask, where did relaxation come from? We take it for granted. Why am I relaxed, and what is the state of relaxation vis-a-vis the tense state? In the tense state, consciousness is constricted. In the relaxed state, consciousness is expanding, happy. Okay? This is our hint. So
After going to that stage, what will happen?
the point is there is still assumption. That's what you're questioning. How do I know this is something that is really no me? I'm not asking you to accept that. All I'm saying is that the process led you to a bigger I.
Yeah, no, I want to know mistake. Then what?
Okay, so we have discovered that there is a place where there is a no objectification. So there must be that's what we call subject.
Why we should reach there?
Why do we want to know that? Because now it makes sense that consciousness becomes two, subject and object.
How practically it is like to go to
The reason for the whole discussion, Gautam, is that we are introducing a concept that the consciousness, field of consciousness is fundamentally different because there is not only objects in consciousness which can be subjected to something like what Newton is doing, but in addition, consciousness has something that is called subject. And that is qualitatively different than the object.
But in this subject has also gone.
But the subject could be objectified, and that produces some confusion. What I am saying, but the objectification stops. Eventually it will expand. So there is a subject, there is a place where there is no objectification. And so that state, which I call no me, no objectification, is what we call subject. Convincing ourselves that there is a subject is the most important thing. Why? Because now we realize consciousness research can never be Newtonian research. It can never be, because something qualitatively different is taking place here. That cannot be an object. Okay? This cannot be an object. This is no me. No objectification is possible. That's it. Yes?
I mean, I understand that there's no me state, it's the sense of I, right? With no thought and... my question is, I understand that in this state, the body is only a sensation and there's no more mind. So, does mathematics and language still exist? Or is it a creation of thought?
Okay.
Because, you know...
It is, okay, you are raising a very, very good question. So this has to be addressed, of course. yes, it is a creation of thought, but to describe a difference between, fundamental difference between two types of experiences that we have. Okay? And they are qualitatively different. We cannot ignore that it is, yes, it is still a construction of thought. Everything that we express in language is a construction of thought. And therefore, there is always the fundamental problem of everything that we do, every analysis that we do is expressed in thought, and that's a fundamental difficulty. Agreed, thought is limited. But we cannot deny that in thought we are describing two fundamentally different kinds of experiences. One experience is object and object and object, no question. Feelings, thoughts, material objects, they are all objects. I can look at them. And then I notice that I'm introducing a new word, I. And grammar is set up in such a way that I is by definition, we think I is one who experiences. And then we say that, okay, but this also can be ordered because I can make the I into a me. Right? And so maybe the I is not a reality, I is just a manner of speaking, language, mental, mind is introducing the I is not real. This is why we go through the process. And we find that no, our experience really changes. Initially we started with an objectified subject, me, very clearly, but eventually that nature of that object changed. Abstract, discontinuous, changing to something that I cannot explain. Which then I introduce as another category of thought. That is the important thing. It's not important that we use thought to get to this truth. The important thing is that we are forced to accept that there are two categories of experience. One category is object, the other category is different from object. What we call it is again just name, we call it subject. Okay? Agree?
Yeah, two categories.
So this is very fundamental for two reasons. One is that in the Newtonian prejudice, since we are talking about prejudices, so we have math and continuity. That's the first prejudice. And we find that no, in consciousness there is discontinuity. And second prejudice is that in Newtonian context we have this word is object, the prejudice of objectivity. And we have objects and subjects. So consciousness theory has to have, human science got to have both concepts of objects and subject. There's no way out of this. Okay. So two assumptions of Mr. Newton does not work for consciousness. Okay. So we'll go with that because the other two will be a little difficult to introduce because they're a little bit difficult to experience. But they will come gradually. But let's go with that and get into quantum physics. Can quantum physics introduce the subject and introduce discontinuity? And what will happen when we talk about quantum physics, that along with discontinuity, quantum physics gives us another concept, which we momentarily call non-locality. And that concept will, when we begin to experience this, will lead to a concept in consciousness, which will explain a property of the subject which we cannot understand right now. We still have not really described this state of relaxation. What actually happened? Why did the consciousness got expanded? A bigger consciousness. How do we know it expanded in the relaxed state? I could include more. In the non-relaxed state when I'm a me, can I include you? No way. I only include me. What is in it for me is my question. What makes me happy? You are an object. I don't see you as worth including. But in that expanded state, something strange happens. I can include you. But what to name it is not very clear yet. What is this extra property that is entering, which is introducing inclusivity? Before I was exclusive. And now I have become inclusive. What produced the magic of inclusivity? What does inclusivity mean? So we'll go a circuitous way. We'll now go discuss quantum physics and come back to it and show that the inclusivity is automatically in the dynamics of quantum. In this way, we'll find that there is a parallel of what quantum physics is about and theory of consciousness, properties of consciousness, the way we experience consciousness, or science of the human being, which is the same thing. Theory of consciousness and science of the human being is the same thing, because what is the characteristic that differentiates us from the world of inanimate objects, rocks and stuff? It's obvious, right? It's consciousness.
I'm sorry, Anuji. How can consciousness
Can I get the
separate?
microphone, please? Because otherwise it won't.
Please.
You just said consciousness separates us from inanimate object. But when we say the consciousness as base of everything, inanimate objects are also consciousness.
Yeah.
So how?
Objects are also consciousness is a bit slightly misleading. So we have to recognize that consciousness can have different aspects of things. Consciousness can be differentiated, in other words. Consciousness, if we just say there is oneness and don't understand quite what is oneness, then we are overdoing the oneness. And this overdoing is a part of the mystical philosophical tradition. But we don't need to overdo it. We can be astute from the beginning. Differentiation is allowed. So the unity that we see is something that does not preclude differentiation. Okay, that is very important. Keep your very good question in mind intact. This is a very good question also. Okay. Quantum physics. What are the objects of quantum physics? Is it the fundamental change, shift that made people very aware that we are dealing with something very different? How different? That was the question. But fundamentally, we found something very special about quantum physics, which is a concept that existed in the physics of particles also, and we'll introduce it there first to get the quantum aspects, the novelty of quantum aspects. But I wanted to appreciate what the fundamental nature is. We discovered that the fundamental objects of quantum physics they're not particles. They are, from the beginning, we recognize that they are waves. And then question of what kind of waves, because waves are familiar also in Newtonian physics, except we have to generalize and understand waves in Newtonian physics. But these waves are not the Newtonian physics, waves of Newtonian physics. These are waves of possibility. Never shy away from experiencing these basic things again and again and again. I love doing it myself because it has a freshness always. Fundamental things should always be experienced again and again and again. One should never tire of the question, what is consciousness? What is the nature of object in quantum physics? And one finds this very loaded words, wave of possibility. So first we have to understand the word wave, and then we have to understand what a wave of possibility. What does that mean? Okay. Now all of you, including the new students, are familiar with the concept of wave of possibility. Are you? Right? Because you have read some. Okay. That's all good. Now suspend your knowledge and let's examine it from freshness. Wave of possibilities. What we mean by wave? And don't get put off. Now we have to do a little bit of advanced thinking. Let's get into a Newtonian wave. Why are you scared of it? Okay, what is a wave? And it's just Newton. This is just Newton. Newton. We're still doing Newton's thing. Water wave is our usual depiction because it's simple to see. What happens when the water wave goes through the water? You have all seen the expanding circles of crest water wave. You have a question, Chantal? No?
I'll ask later. It may conflict, so I'll ask later.
Say it again?
I'll ask later. It may
Okay. Right. Good. So, waves get bigger and bigger. That's very clear. That's one thing you can get from this picture. But what we don't get from this picture is that what is happening to the water molecules. We must not forget that the water wave is a wave in water. Okay? Water wave is a wave of water. What's the difference between molecules are moving? Always. In a pond, molecules are moving. Random movement, we call it heat. But here the molecules are moving in an orderly way. And the strange thing about a wave is that the molecules don't move progressively. The wave moves progressively. You watch the wave. You can put a cork instead of molecules which you cannot see. So put a cork in the water, and what we see is very interesting. I'll simplify the movement a little bit. Water actually is quite complicated, so it's not a very good example for our purpose. But let's simplify and say we are watching the cork. Most of the movement of the cork will be up and down movement. Okay? There's a little bit sideways too, but let's forget about that. So as the wave moves, wave has moved. Wave has become bigger. The test lines have moved away and even bigger, even bigger. But on every test line, if you watch the cork is in place, but it is moving. It is moving. Right? It's moving up and down. So what we see? We are seeing that the disturbance of the object, the cork, from its equilibrium position, that is what is moving. It's the disturbance which is moving. The cork was disturbed here, that disturbance was here, now it is also here. And then it will be also here, and it will be also here, right? So we say waves are traveling disturbances.
Waves are traveling disturbance.
Waves are traveling disturbance. Right? Okay? Completely visualizable, completely understandable. This completely recognized. It's not hard to understand. So we can make a picture of this disturbance. With distance. Okay. Traveling disturbance. Waves are traveling disturbance. Disturbance, if we look at through this space, at the crest, the disturbance is maximum, but in between also we can define, we can see yes, there will be other parts, but they will not be moving up and down that much, a little bit less. And this is what is being depicted here. Crest, and they move, crest. Number of crests becomes bigger and bigger. But in between crests, there is still disturbance. And then in between places, there is no disturbance at all. Okay. So all this is in our mind. So how do I put this in for possibility? Now I have to do something which would stretch your imagination a little bit. Possibility. Is it possible to quantify possibility? Why not? We can try. So it's an amount of possibility. Quantity of possibility. Now this quantity of possibility or amount of possibility is expressed in physics by talking about a possibility wave function. This is a language that physicists use. This concept of function, no need to bother about it too much. It's a mathematical concept. A function just means it has a mathematical relationship with the object of which it is a function. It's a function of position. So this is a function of x, that means the quantity changes with the variation of x. Don't be scared. It's just a mathematical concept, okay? Just a mathematical concept to describe the same thing as we describe very physically with looking at the disturbance of the core. Analog of the disturbance, what is being disturbed is the possibility. Amount of possibility meaning that there will be some quantitative measure of possibility, and that is what is changing from position to position. And that measure eventually we identify that as probability. This part we tried to introduce in the first semester, as many of you found very obscure, and you got turned off. Let not that happen again. Try to accommodate it. How do we accommodate it? By first accepting. Don't think of this as difficult to understand. The analogy is clear. Disturbance. Disturbance, the movement of disturbance. So here, think of possibility wave. Let's think of an electron being dropped in the room. Okay, close your eyes, think of the electron dropped in the room. And then the possibility is expanding. So we have crest lines, and the crest lines become bigger and bigger. What does that mean? That means the possibility of finding the electron in various places is expanding. Electron will not only show up in a little bit of space around where I dropped it, more I wait, the electron will show up in far away places. All over the room in no time. Just like the water, the disturbance was spreading. Here, the possibility of finding the electron is spreading. And what is probability? Probability is the quantitative measure of how much possibility is there of finding the electron at a given position in the room. Is it very difficult to understand? Okay. The relation of possibility and probability. Probability is a quantitative measure of how much possibility there is at a given point of the room in which the electron is placed. First of all, it starts at a point, but then the way it spreads, the possibility of finding the electron is becoming more and more over a sphere all over the room. It's three-dimensional, not two-dimensional like water wave. Are we already 1.5 hour mark? Oops. Okay, I'll take a little bit longer time to finish on this particular problem. Does it make any sense? Again, think of the electron. Electron, impossibility. Where is the electron? Initially, it's just around the place where I left it. But the wave is expanding, just like the water wave, the disturbance reaches faraway places. Similarly, the possibility of electron being in faraway places in the room, right? And faraway places. And the measure of how much possibility is what we call probability. Probability of finding the electron, which is a measurable one. Because if I plot large number of experiments of where I actually found the electron, then indeed I can calculate the probability of finding the electron. Well, it's a very simple process. I measured the number of times I found the electron at a given place. That will give me calculation of, okay, what is the probability of finding the electron at that. It's a measurable one. Quantitative measure of the amount of possibility. So not only I know the possibility of the electron being at a point, but also amount of possibility. Just like for the water wave, not only I knew that there would be a disturbance, but I also knew the amount of disturbance. Here likewise, I know the amount of possibility, which is the probability of finding the electron. So physics becomes quantitative, and that's another matter. We are not interested in that part very much. But we need to understand that part. That quantum physics is a quantitative physics. This is why it's physics. It's mathematical. It's calculable. Things are concrete. It can be verified by experimental data very, very accurately. All that comes from this fact that it actually enables us to calculate probabilities. Very important for scientists. For us, what is important? Capture the essence. What is the essence? What is going on? What is going on? Electron, now it can be found not where we dropped it. Newtonian physics says electron at rest, no forces acting, things should have been there. Is this bottle, if it stopped moving, would that be possible in Newtonian physics? No. No, Newtonian physics never happens. However minute the object is, things should stay put. If no forces act, it should stay in the state of homeostasis. Quantum object? No, it starts expanding. Very strange. Very strange. Right? This is why we call it a wave. Particles stay put if there are no forces. But to stay in state of uniform motion in a straight line, in a time. They can only be one place at a time. Look at what is happening in the wave. Spreading all over the room. Fundamentally different. But what is actually going on? Where is the actually electron? Is it all over the room? We put a whole breed of Geiger counters, electron measurement apparatuses in the room. Easily imagine, right? Geiger counter, you have seen those things, they go tick, tick, tick in the presence of radioactivity. We have all over the room. Is the electron everywhere in the room? Like the water wave, the disturbance was everywhere, we can see it. We put corks everywhere and corks everywhere on the test line, moving up and down. Shall we find that electron is triggering off every Geiger counter in the room? Another mystery. No. No. If we release one electron, we'll always find one electron at only one Geiger counter. But not necessarily at Geiger counter replaced where we drop the electron. Not necessarily there. We can find it here, there, randomly distributed, anywhere in the room. But we make very large number of experiments, we find that the electron will give us a probability distribution that can be calculated from quantum physics. Which means the electron was in possibility everywhere in the room. Now we understand what possibility means. It is possible that the electron was everywhere in the room. Electron is everywhere in the room in possibility. Visualize this. Cannot be in space and time. We cannot measure them in space and time. If they were space and time, all the Geiger counters would have taken off, but they don't. Something is different. Something is different here. We have to think. What is different? Is possibility waves? They don't exist in space and time. That's what is different. If they did, then all the Geiger counters would have gone off. They don't. Where are they? Where are they? This is where we need to open our mind. And the physicists were prejudiced from the beginning. And still are. Many people still don't believe that we have to postulate another domain of reality in order to understand quantum physics. There is no way to understand quantum physics without postulating another domain of reality. Why is that important? Why is that important? Now here is the same obtuseness we find among philosophers, among mystics, to comprehend. Because what is this other domain of reality? Mystics who are connoisseurs, they always have understood. They always have understood that there is a different domain of reality. But religions never understood that. Ordinary people get confused because many mystics say different things. Is there another domain of reality? You will never find common answer to this question from spiritual tradition. They will talk in vague language. Maximum they do is talk about a domain called transcendence, or not even domain, just an idea called transcendent, an idea called immanent. In English, in similarly in Sanskrit or in Indian languages, there will be similar word, but the words will never describe this in any fashion that we could understand. Only the very wonderful treatises called the Upanishads and a few others, there we find clear statement.
Can you just explain these two terms briefly? Transcendent and immanent. Can you explain these?
I'm not going to explain right now, but indeed I shall gradually. But what I'm trying to get at is that, look, this is very difficult, okay? Don't be bashful about acknowledging that this is very difficult to admit. Why is it so difficult? Because we cannot experience that, no? Just as we cannot measure that. The difficulty of quantum physics is where it is coming from. How do you measure possibility? You cannot measure, no. Everything you have to gauge by inference. What happens here? What happens here is that the electron is not at the same place. Newton would always predict that the electron should always be at the same place. So something is different because the electron is appearing in different Geiger counters in different experiments. That much we realize, something weird. So we say quantum physics is weird. But it's very difficult to immediately conclude that the electrons must be in another domain called domain of possibility. Same thing with consciousness. We say that things happen in our experience. Things happen weirdly, abruptly. We decided, we felt relaxed, abruptly, discontinuously. Where is the abrupt change coming from? Well, we tentatively concluded that we have a self. That was a little bit easier to conclude. So some of you accepted it, some of you are still skeptical. Both situations are good. But really, there is something fundamentally different there too. Abrupt change coming, is it possible in space and time? Have you ever seen in space and time things happening abruptly, discontinuously? What does a discontinuous change mean? Now we ask that question. If we continuously move in space and time, is it impossible to do that? No, I can cover everything in space and time by continuous movement. Who needs discontinuity? So as soon as discontinuity has arisen, this concept, it means that there is another domain of reality. We are glossing over that part because it's more complex. But there is no way of avoiding it. Discontinuity means that we must have jumped out of space and time. Just as we are forced with this question, possibility wave, and that meaning of possibility implies that there is another domain of reality. Please don't gloss over anything Valentina is telling me to stop, and I will, because we'll come back with this question. I want you to stay with this question. These fundamentals always have to look upon again and again and again. Am I understanding this? Am I understanding the compulsory nature? Why reality is like this? That reality has to be like this, because if it were not like this, it would all be Newtonian physics. Nothing wrong with Newtonian physics when it applies. What is wrong is that Newtonian physics says everything is determined, everything is just movement by acting, force acting on it, and that's the world. Can we accept that for the human being? It's foolish to accept it. Excludes consciousness, excludes mind, excludes feeling, excludes everything that we call it. And then the challenge before us is that how to understand ourselves. If we cannot understand ourselves, how can we understand society? How can we institute social change? How can we make social institutions? See the problem? We've got to deal with this. If we don't, society becomes like it has become. It's arbitrary, no rules are binding. Who gave us these rules of making social systems the way they are? If there is no order behind it, why bother? Anything goes. Indeed, this is what is happening. Anarchy. Anything goes. Dictatorial reign. This is what is happening. Every country is getting people who are dictators. Mind will comes. How can we change that if we cannot show that there is indeed order behind the movement? And that order is not Newtonian order, deterministic order. The order is not something that can be predicted and controlled. No, the order is very, very different kind of order. And we have an answer to that order. We know how to get to that order much better. We have a system. If we cannot do that, how can we propose to change anything that is going on? Okay, it will be just my word versus another person's word. Who is correct? What is the criterion of choosing? You see, all these questions have to be answered before we can become social activists. What I'm saying, quantum activism works because we can find a science behind all these things that are taking place, beginning with this concept of possibility wave. That opens up the door to an entire new way of thinking that gives us answers to the human problem. Okay? Thank you. We'll take a break.